The American comedian Jackie Mason has died, aged 93. The former rabbi was a regular on television and had a number of hit Broadway shows. Known for his distinctive New York accent, Mason's humour was based on pun, innuendo and observation. So let's speak to Ted Johnson, Washington correspondent for Deadline.com and formerly worked at Variety magazine. Thanks for your time here on BBC News. Now, for many young viewers and audiences, they would have never heard of Jackie Mason. Just put him into context for us.
Sure. He was kind of a comedian from another era. You heard the term Borscht Belt. It's this whole generation of comedians that kind of grew up performing in the Catskills, this series of summer resorts. And that kind of established its own brand of comedy back in the 50s and 60s. And a lot of them are closed now, but he really took that and carried it well into the 80s and the 90s. Had kind of a remarkable career. As you said, he was a rabbi. He didn't really like that family line of business, and eventually kind of migrated and got out of that line of business by performing in some of these resorts and started getting a few lucky breaks and ended up on national television in the 60s. So I would think that if you're a young person and you don't know who Jackie Mason is, look to someone like probably Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, who remain exceedingly popular. They really have this kind of Jackie Mason kind of conversational humor. That's what Jackie Mason would call it. I would say it's almost more observation humor tied with a kind of a tinge of indignation.
Yeah, he did say that from the age of 12 he was trying to get out of the whole rabbi tradition of his family. Now, about his style of comedy, it was very blunt, wasn't it? At times it was very non-PC, and he had a few ups and downs, and it wasn't until The World According to Me in '86 that he sort of recovered. But just talk to us about that bluntness.
Well, what really got him in trouble was in 1964. He was on the Ed Sullivan Show, which at the time was the most prestigious platform for any comic, any musical act, because it had this huge national audience on CBS. And Ed Sullivan was on the side of the stage motioning to him with his fingers, trying to get him to get off the air because his time was coming up. And Mason was doing really good, was having really good reception from the audience and wanted to continue the act, and made a remark that made it seem like to Ed Sullivan that he was giving this offensive gesture to the audience, and Sullivan fired him. And even though Mason actually won a court settlement based on that, I think there was a defamation case, it ended up really hurting his career for almost 2 decades. And it wasn't until the 1980s when he started these one-man shows where he had this resurgence, not just on Broadway, but also in movies and TV.
Yeah, I think one of his last shows was in 2008, wasn't it, in New York, the Ultimate Jew, I think it was called. Where stand-up, when you think about stand-up and those one-man shows, where would you put him?
I think right up there with someone like Don Rickles and Rodney Dangerfield. Again, these are names that may not be known to current generations, but right up there with just amazing creativity, amazing powers of thinking on your feet and responding to the audience. It's so funny because when we think of stand-up comedy, you often think of one-liners. And if it was just one-liners, I could repeat what Jackie Mason said, some of his lines, but it doesn't have the timing, it doesn't have the delivery. And that was really, I think, the gift of Jackie Mason.
Ted Johnson, thank you very much for introducing us and reminding us who Jackie Mason was. Thank you very much indeed.